Hey everyone, happy afternoon to all of you. I wanted to hop in to LinkedIn for just a little bit today and talk about six-figure consulting clients, six-figure coaching clients, six-figure professional services clients and up. This has been something that we've been talking about for the last week or so, specifically at Bold House, really talking a lot about this. We hosted a masterclass yesterday on this exact topic, but I wanted to hop in here and expand on something that we talked about in the masterclass. And if you missed it, the replay is still available through Monday. So you can still catch it at the URL below. One of the things that I shared on the masterclass yesterday was one of the mindset traps that a lot of consultants, coaches, and professional service providers get themselves in is this idea that if you start practicing business development marketing, you start landing four-figure clients, five-figure clients, that will just naturally grow, naturally expand into six-figure, multi-six-figure opportunities. And that's not usually the case. Now, I want to inoculate myself a little bit because obviously, if you're doing that by design, you're someone who has sold six-figure and six-figure plus engagements, and you have a very specific gateway offering that you use, that's one thing. But a lot of folks aren't doing this by design. It's really by default, this idea that, well, if I just really work hard and I get into the client and I sell them maybe a package for, $8,500 in employee training or coaching engagement for $12,500, that will just naturally evolve and mature and expand into, let's say, a $150,000 client or a $250,000 client or a $800,000 client, right? And that isn't usually how this works. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And I didn't have time to cover all of it in the masterclass. So I wanted to do that here. And then if you happen to miss the masterclass, you can grab it through the URL just right below that I have here on the screen. One of the things that I shared in the masterclass was word for word scripting on how to really understand if the client's really going to be invested and there's an opportunity there for a bigger client engagement, exactly how to ask a question in a way that's not salesy, but really coming from a place of trying to understand their commitment level, their urgency level, really get a sense of, what are they thinking? What's going on in their mind? And it's not really about asking about budget because clients never know. As a corporate decision maker, honestly, still as a decision maker now of an Inc. 5,000 company, I hate when people are like, "What's your budget?" I don't know. What is it going to cost me to solve this problem? So that's one of the worst questions that you can ask. But we give some really, really killer scripting in step 5 of that master class, so you can hop in and get that if that's of interest to you. To have my word for word sales script on that. But let's talk about why 4 and 5 figure client engagements don't necessarily turn into 6-figure engagements. One of the reasons is because you're often dealing with too low of a decision maker. A lot of the decision makers who ultimately get delegated to or tasked with going out and finding someone who could coach a particular employee or handle a copywriting assignment or put together, a 3-hour client reception if you're an event planner, or put together a landing page on digital advertising, or put together a small influencer marketing campaign, or one press release, or one half-day training. The decision makers, quote unquote decision makers, who ultimately get tasked with reaching out about those smaller level opportunities, and they're approaching you with those things, they're often not the decision makers who have the altitude in the organization to truly understand how various problems and challenges are hurting the organization's ability to really meet their goals that they have set. So oftentimes, if you're dealing with a lower level decision maker, let's say a senior manager versus a senior vice president or executive vice president, and so that senior manager has a much more myopic viewpoint, much lower altitude in the organization. In fact, that's often, for those of you who are coaches, part of what you're working with them on is to help them elevate their viewpoints. So a lot of you already know, because of the field that you're in, that if you're dealing with someone who's maybe at a senior manager level, they're not going to come at this with the same level view, perspective, ROI understanding, strategic, view out the cockpit window of why this is so important to an organization. So if you're dealing with a decision maker who's much lower in the organization, cannot see as far out onto the horizon, has smaller budget authority, a smaller budget in their department overall, they don't necessarily understand how everything in the organization fits together, they're not going to be the same decision maker that's going to be able to invest, say, $500,000 with your culture transformation organization, right? Or your DE&IB or your DEIB organization. So you're dealing now with someone who is not ultimately going to be that decision maker. One of the things that's really tough, though, and I'm sure those of you who've been in the situation will understand exactly what I'm about to say, and that is how awkward it can be if you've established a relationship with, let's say, a senior manager, but now you really need to be talking to the executive vice president. There is definitely an awkwardness that you've now put yourself in, that you're, after having established that relationship, it almost feels like you're going over that person's head, and it can get really tricky. We ultimately end up teaching folks in our Bold House Collective some of the nuances to dealing with that issue, but it's better not to let the toothpaste out of the tube to begin with. So it's important to understand that if you're going to end up with a sort of lower level entry point into an organization and you don't correct that right away, going forward in the future, you may now put yourself in a position where, even with the most diplomatic sort of navigation around this political hot water, hot potato of now going over their head, I mean, it's not a great thing, and it can really alienate the decision maker that you have the relationship with. And that's really like a bummer, right? You built this great relationship with somebody in the organization, but you realize that you have to go over their heads. That's kind of a tough thing to do. The second reason, or number two on the list of one of the reasons that 4 and 5 figure consulting opportunities don't necessarily turn into 6-figure plus opportunities, is because you paint yourself into a corner in the way that you initially approach the conversation with a client. One of the biggest sticking points or mindset traps that we hear from coaches, consultants, and professional service providers is that here a client comes to them asking them for X, Y, and Z. A prospect comes and asks for X, Y, and Z. And so now they feel like they really need to talk to that problem. They need to answer what it is the client is asking for without educating the client about the bigger context of what their organization, what their coaching company or consulting company, et cetera, does. And so now they paint themselves into a corner on that. And essentially, it's no different than what some Hollywood actors would describe as typecasting, where you kind of get stuck in one area. They will often then see you as someone who just does training workshops, or who just coaches one-on-one, or just does copywriting, or just does this. It can be very hard to, after you've initially done that more tactical thing, to then up level their perspective of you as a much more strategic partner to their organization. So if you don't sort of create that strategic trusted partner perception right up front, and rather you just focus on giving them what they ask for, you're going to end up painting yourself right into a corner that's really tough to dig yourself out of. Again, we're back to letting that toothpaste out of the tube, instead of just thinking, how can we keep the toothpaste in the tube? The third thing that comes up for a lot of folks is they don't even start talking about fixing the bigger client issue, really being more sort of strategic in the future planning with the client. They're so afraid of, the client just hired me for this $20,000 engagement. I don't want to keep selling to them. They just gave me this $20,000, which I'll hear that word a lot. They gave me, they didn't give you anything, but that's another hint on mindset there. They just gave me this $20,000. I can't be asking them for more money. These aren't gifts. These are equitable exchanges of value, right? But the idea that if they if they've just hired you for one thing, you can't possibly be talking about the next steps with them. You just want to do a great job and deliver on this first engagement. So what ends up happening is that first engagement, let's say it's $15,000, $20,000, it wraps up and then it's over. And then great, you're now back out into the figurative parking lot and you're knocking on the door trying to figure out how to get a meeting with the decision maker after you've already completed, you're out of the building. Now you're trying to claw your way back in. From the decision maker's side of the table, they feel complete. They've had appetizer, entree, dessert. They feel good. They've asked for the check. They're heading out the door. And now you're trying to say, like, oh, wait, I forgot to offer you a cappuccino, or I forgot to offer you this other, side of French fries or whatever, but they're already out the door. So waiting too long and not understanding when to broach that subject and how to do it in a way that's really of value and of service to the client, which is something that we teach our clients at Bold House, ends up costing people an awful lot of opportunity because they wait until they're ejected, they are wrapped up, they've tied a bow and everything, everyone's finished, and now they're thinking, now how do I sell the next engagement? So that's another reason 4 and 5 figure consulting engagements don't often go into something bigger. Another reason that comes up for folks is because from a pricing perspective, they've anchored themselves low. Excuse me. Right out of the gate, they started with a lower price point option on what they do. Maybe it's 5,000, 15,000, 35,000, but they've anchored very low. And at no point in the initial conversations, in the initial relationship building with the prospect, did they really even seed at any point at all that most of their clients are working with them at a higher level for a longer period of time. There's like no context provided. So without that, the only anchoring that's been done is on, let's say, that $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 opportunity. So that's really now what you have solidified in the mind of your customer. Not good, right? So that's number 4. And then number 5, another really big reason that 4 and 5 figure opportunities don't naturally grow into 6-figure plus opportunities is the lack of discovery phase that is done and the lack of measurement. And that goes hand in hand with the lack of before and after measurement that is often done on these lower figure opportunities of 4 and 5 figures versus 6 and 7 figures. So let's say you go in for a team coaching, an executive retreat, putting together, one customer experience event for the client, just something that's, again, just 5 or 4 figures, low 5 figures. If you don't build discovery into that, if you don't build measurement into that before and after, you're not giving yourself anything, any intel that would really help your client build a business case for investing more or opting for a larger transformation inside their organization on whatever the business problem is that you're helping them to solve. So if you're not doing the measurement, you're not doing the discovery, you really don't have, I hate to use the word ammunition because it's not like you against your client, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you don't have any good data. You don't have any anecdotal evidence. You don't have any additional insight into the process that's going to really allow you to have an elevated conversation with the client going forward. So that's yet another reason that 4 and 5 figure engagements, if it's by default. So again, I want to say this. If it's by design and you have a gateway offering, that's one thing, and that's great. And we love helping our clients develop those gateway offerings. But if it's really just more reactive, if it's just by default that you're selling 4 and 5 figure opportunities, and you're hoping, crossing your fingers and, wishing on a, rainbow that's going to naturally move in to those 6-figure, those multi-6-figure, those 7-figure opportunities, it's not, because a lot of the things that are inherent to those smaller dollar client engagements inevitably undermine your ability to sell the larger engagements. And so part of what we start to do with our clients, particularly at things like our upcoming conference Groove that's in Fort Lauderdale in October, is we really deconstruct this for folks. And we say, look, if you're thinking, I'm just going to build this ladder, and if I just keep building this ladder over here, it's somehow going to get me over here. And that's not how it works. If you're building a 4 and 5 figure ladder over here, it's going to continue to take you up the 4 and 5 figure ladder. If we say, wait a second, let's fundamentally think about how you're approaching clients, how you're structuring those initial conversations, how you're structuring your client engagements, how you're structuring the follow-on conversations. Now, all of a sudden, we are building a different ladder against a different wall that leads to 6-figure, multi 6-figure, 7-figure, multi 7-figure opportunities for your consulting business, for your coaching business, for your professional services business. So it's about where the ladder starts being built. And just because you're great at building a 4 or 5-figure ladder does not necessarily mean that you're going to be able to jump over to the 6-figure ladder. It really is about your come from the get-go. And I can't emphasize that enough. If that's something you want to do, you want to start deconstructing that, and you want to start building that 6-figure ladder up against the right wall, the best way to do that, hop into the masterclass. It's free. It's available until Monday. We've got some phenomenal step 4 and 5 are going to blow you away. In step 5, I give some of my exact word by word sales scripting on how to help you with this that feels really authentic and natural. And I think you're really going to love that. So you've got the URL there, boldhouse.com/your new normal with some dashes in there. I actually need to go lead a faculty team call. We're actually looking at, we meet with our faculty regularly, kind of check in on all of our clients' progress and how they're doing. So I need to hop over and do that. But I hope this was helpful for you. And if you are a consultant, coach, or professional services provider, don't let this masterclass get away, because it's one of the best ones we've ever done. It's really fantastic, you guys. All right, have a great rest of your week. And I will see you back here on LinkedIn in a couple of days.